Good. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's a special meeting, June 15th, 2021, and we're going to start the meeting with a few resolutions. So I'm going to share my screen and put those up so everyone can see them. Okay, we've talked about these and it's just due to the timing, we wanted to get those passed. So Brian, are you able to get us started? Thought I let Brian in.
Yeah,
Oh.
I'm in the car for a few more minutes, so
Okay.
I'm not going to be able to read.
All right, Ralph, would you please get us started?
Sorry.
Sure.
That's fine, Brian.
Resolve the Board of Trustees of the Village of West Hampton Beach hereby approves 2 grant disbursement agreements between the village and the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, DASNY, for the Main Street Improvement Project, project numbers 13096 and 15927, each involving a grant of $250,000, and the State and Municipal Facilities Program, SAM grant, project number 9506, in the amount of $250,000, and authorizes the mayor to execute said agreements and any documents required pursuant to said agreements.
Second.
Thanks. Yeah, this finally, we're getting the money back from New York State for these grants for the Main Street project, so that's a big relief. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nope. Am I up next?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, well, Steve, actually, but it doesn't matter. Go ahead.
Doesn't you there? Steve, you there or no? All right, I'll do it. Resolved that the Ocean Dune Club condominium is hereby authorized to use the Village Hall Board Meeting Room on Sunday, June 27th, 2021, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. for the annual condominium meeting.
Second.
I'll second it if no one else. Steve, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
That was it.
Mike,
Yes, Steve seconded it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and the last one's for you, Steve.
yeah, I got it. Resolved that the Hampton Synagogue is hereby authorized to use Rogers Beach on Saturday, July 17th, 2021, from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. for the Tisha B'Av religious ceremony.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and does anybody have any comments about any of these resolutions?
No.
Okay,
No, thank you. I'm glad we're getting the money finally from the state, so.
me too. Okay, so now to the real purpose of our meeting today. We have 2 guests with us that are going to speak to us about the new marijuana legislation, Kim Lauby and Dave Falkowski. Thank you for joining us. Oh, wait, all right, there's a couple people in the waiting room I need to let in. You know, as everybody's aware, the state has passed the legislation legalizing marijuana, and now it's up to the different municipalities to decide if they're going to allow the sale within the municipal boundaries. And you know, this, when it comes to the use, there's not much we can do, except we can pass a law. We can discuss the boundaries of it, but what, you know, where, if we want to prohibit any kind of smoking, cigarettes, marijuana, maybe we say in our parks or playgrounds, beaches, Main Street, but we can talk about that at another time. The discussion today is really whether we will allow dispensaries and cafes within the village. So I know that Kim and Dave, you've spoken at other.
It's the unlikely duo of
Yeah.
Dave Falkowski and Kim Lauby, right? But, you know, and this is kind of a great opportunity for us to talk about all of the things that we have in common on how this is going to move forward. And there actually is more common ground for Dave and I, even though we both clearly sit on opposite sides of this conversation. And but we've become friends through this process and have really said, look, we know this is going to have a public health impact. Dave's side will look at industry and how, in the benefits that industry can bring to the table, even by giving back and from a charitable point of view. My frame of reference is going to be about how do we make sure we keep kids, communities, and folks safe through this process. And then there's this piece that was kind of given this opportunity to you guys as a voting entity to say, hey, we, for the first time, are being given a choice immediately of whether or not we want to let this happen within the village boundary, right? You never before have you been given this opportunity to say you have so much local control on it. And interestingly enough, never before have you been given the opportunity to opt in or opt out the way that that it's given to you. And my guess is you're pretty well versed in this idea that the only two things that you really, definitely we want to see good sound policy. We want to see you guys write policy about smoking tobacco, smoking, marijuana, vaping on as much as you can to the extent of the law. And there's some great there's some great information out there already about the Clean Air Act and how to tap into some of those. And we have other partners that can help guide you in how to set those policies. So you definitely have that. And I'm glad that's already on your radar, right? Then it becomes policy is only as good as enforcement. And we know that enforcement is a whole other conversation to have with this. But for the issue of pot cafes and pot dispensaries, this is where it becomes, where could it be in the village? Those become concerns. And then what does this look like for the village? And should the village opt in immediately for this round? Or should we just say, let's give each other a year to put together a coalition of I call it the butcher, the baker, the policymaker, but school folks, law enforcement, public health, public works, parents, youth, to really design a coalition around how do we make sure that we work using science to move forward and create the healthiest outcome we can, should West Hampton Beach Village decide next year or down the road to opt in. I'm sure you're well aware that you can opt in immediately. You don't have to wait. You don't have to put that on pause. But the challenge is once you opt in, you can never opt out. So you can't say, oh, wait a second, we want to rethink this and I want to opt out. So you only have the chance to opt out once, and you can always opt in no matter when you opt, if you choose to opt out on the front end. We both, and I'm just going to actually not speak for Dave, although I know because we've done this a few times already, or at least once already, but had some follow-up conversations. Dave, what do you want to add to the conversation, and what's important for you to let the law and the policymakers know?
Well, I think in the preliminary part of this conversation here is to realize a municipality does have the ability to create some legislation or decree of the land to opt out, but that is also still subject to a permissive referendum. So so in other words, the community still has a choice to get enough signatures to get a referendum vote and vote on this issue. So this conversation is about our community at large. And if we look at things in context, New York in general has been polling largely in favor of legalization and obviously having dispensaries. Most recently, the town of Riverhead and the town of Southampton have both put up polls that are overwhelmingly in favor of not opting out. So we also need to realize too, the state there's many, many years, almost a decade or more, in creating this bill that they've passed, the subsequent CCB, the Cannabis Control Board, and also the Cannabis Advisory Board. And to Kim's point, that is this coalition that brings to the table all sorts of different facets of the community, legislators, industry, and other interested parties, public health. So we already have a lot of these issues addressed in MRTA, the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act. And my opinion right now is we really want to involve as many of our local community members as possible, because at this point, in my experience in the legal cannabis realm since 2017 in New York State's pilot hemp program here, things move very, very fast. And here we are in 2021, and we have very advanced and developed and monetized cannabis industries in multiple states. And my phone is off the hook, and I'm just one person here. There is a lot of big money, big interests, not just in New York, not even just in the US, internationally, drilling on this market. So my position is the longer we delay, the less opportunity there is for locals to participate at this level who may be precluded. You know, we need to realize when we opt out of one thing, we actually restrict market access for those of us who are still maybe cultivating or processing here. So there's really a lot of implications, you know, to discuss here as we step back and we make sure that all the issues are addressed that our community needs addressing.
And so, well, Dave looks at that from that vantage, his vantage point. I always look from the, what do we need for our youth? What do we need for our most vulnerable populations? And Dave and I have definitely have some great common ground in this spot, right? We know right now, if you're working with young people, if you're working in the schools, the first thing you're going to hear about is a concern with vaping. They can't get it under control. And again, that was something that was supposed to be well protected from our young people. It was supposed to be something that we had great regulation on, and it wasn't going to wind up in the young people's hands. Well, I don't think you need the chief nor myself to tell you vaping products are winding up in our young people's hand, and the school is up against it in trying to figure out how to manage this, how to educate on this, how to teach this. We know that we do really well in West Hampton Beach with when we study the rates of our 8th grade use, and we've studied them over the years. Our 8th graders actually land well beneath the national average when it comes to the use of substances, 30-day use of marijuana, alcohol, tobacco products. But once we go to 10th grade, that number triples, and it triples at a very interesting place in brain development and in young people's development. And so our conversation becomes about how do we reduce further addiction? How do we, you know, help the young person develop in a very healthy way? And one of the things we know that 2 of the main reasons why young people drink and drug is simply because they have great access to it. It's available, and it's a community norm. Now, we run an interesting way in the village of West Hampton Beach, and just looking at our community norm is, how do we define community? Is it the 2,000 plus that live here year round, or is it the 25,000 plus that visit here from Memorial Day to Labor Day? We know that the industry is the substance industry is already large and already it's well supplied out here. You have 3 liquor stores in 2.9 square miles and a whole variety of liquor licenses on top of that. So there already is a saturation here. And again, delaying onset of addiction is what we love to talk about, because the longer a young person waits to pick up a substance, the better chances are that they're never going to develop addiction. Now, some will say it's just pot and it's no big deal, right? And for some people, it's not. Some people can smoke pot all their life and it's never going to impact them in a negative way. But for 1 in 10, we just lit a fire that is going to explode, especially when it gets into that young developing brain. We have a concern for pregnant and parenting and nursing moms. We have a concern for those who suffer with any kind of mental health. And so how do we begin to build those protections in? It's really important to understand who's going to be on that CCB board. And it's really to understand that the only control you really have is time, place, and manner. So even when asked at the state level, where does this land with neon signs? How can people advertise? The only control that the villages have is time, place, and manner. One of the key folks who is being vetted right now to be on the CCB board at the state level is also somebody who is well into the marijuana industry. And so making sure that there's fair representation on both sides becomes really, really important in this conversation. I'm a not-for-profit. I make no money whether or not it's legalized or not. And some will say I stay in business longer. And the unfortunate part is we already are in business. And the projections of what's going to happen with young people and vulnerable populations as we begin to heal from COVID we're using terms like tsunami, the wave that is going to hit. We know suicide is up. We know mental health need is up. We know addiction is up. And by the way, you're losing agencies regularly that prevent, treat, and support recovery efforts. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast right now. West Hampton Village did have a treatment facility open up in it, and it's since closed its doors, and that building is vacant now. Southampton Town does not have one agency now within the confines of the town that works to treat drug and alcohol addiction.
Hey,
So-
what did you say what did you say? We had a
Family-
facility that
Family
opened in the
Service League?
village that's
Yeah.
vacant?
Family Service League, which has been behind in the old Beinecke building. I don't know if it's still called
Oh,
Beinecke
yeah.
building. They have since closed the doors here, and they've moved their programs up to Riverhead.
Mhm. We
in-
do still have the Seafield Center.
Seafield Center, correct, which is a for-profit. So the difference that becomes an understanding of for-profit facilities and not-for-profit facilities. Seafield has the right to say, although they scholarship and markedly is great over there, but they have the right to say, if you can't pay, you don't have treatment here, where a not-for-profit facility does not have that. You have to provide treatment no matter the ability to pay or not.
Sure. So, the way I hear these issues and my perspectives and my understanding of the MRTA is we want to address all of this, right? So what I hear is marijuana products are here now. What I hear are vape products are here now. And what I hear is there's a lack of enforcement. And so solutions to this are to take a black market industry, turn it on its face, test the products so we don't wind up with things like a vape crisis powered by a product called Honeycut. I invite you to look it up. Vice did a great little video. It turned out to be vitamin E acetate that black market vape dealers were cutting their products with and shipping it out east here. My point is, we already have dispensaries in our towns. They're selling out of their living rooms, cars, backyards, wherever. We have a mental health issue. So what do? Let's take the money away from the black market where it could be getting diverted into things that are harming our community. And let's use it to fund these programs, because it sounds like we have a mental health issue and people are self-medicating, whether it's with black market marijuana, whether it's with alcohol or other forms of drugs that they're using to soothe their soul. And that's what we're looking to do. Just take this black market industry that exists here. It's said that it's one of the largest, if not the largest in the country here in New York. And let's properly regulate it. And so there's money here on the municipal level. When we talk about opting out potentially within the village boundaries, just know if Southampton Town chooses not to opt out, all they need to do is cross over the line from West Hampton Beach's beautiful village into somewhere in Southampton Town at large where a dispensary is located, pick up their marijuana products and drive back home. And in the comfort of their home or wherever else consumption is allowed in West Hampton Beach, they're going to consume that product. But what happens in between there is West Hampton Beach misses out on tax revenue. And this tax revenue can be used to open shuttered non-for-profits, can be used to fund staffing and training costs for DREs, drug recognition experts. We want to address, drugged and intoxicated driving. So there'll be a 4% local tax if you have a dispensary or a cafe in town. 1% goes to the county. The other 3% goes to the municipality. And I think it's a very clever mechanism. So if we opt out, we're literally saying, we're going to let the black market run. We're not going to access legal revenues. We're not going to address these concerns we have.
My gut is opt out on the thought that little bit of revenue that you think you're going to generate coming in is not worth the sacrifice of people walking down Main Street, buying this stuff, doing it. We already have liquor stores, but they are supervised by the liquor authority. Cigarettes are already supervised the other way. I don't think having places pop up on Main Street or other little side streets is what we need. I don't think we need that in this community. And yes, can they drive to Southampton, go get it? Okay, go ahead. And we can't stop doing it. But the other thing is, I think that we don't need to have.
I think it's important to look at total economics on it, right? And the truth is, it's well beyond my pay grade to figure that out. What I do know is we're constantly fighting for money. We're constantly waiting for the state for money, so I'm glad to hear we're not the only ones in the waiting game for the check to come from the state, right? So if you just take the opiate settlement, right? To me, we're in this place that is almost, if the alien ship came down, be like, wait a second, you guys are constantly fighting for money. You're constantly underfunding. One of the things we're saying is kids aren't educated, parents aren't educated, community, we haven't raised community health when it comes to substance use disorder or addiction. Gambling's just become legal in New York State. So you have all these kind of what we identify from a science base as risk factors hitting communities without enough protective factors built in all around to the 4 different domains: individual, public, societal, family, school, and community. I added one when I said social. So when we take a look at those different areas and using science and measuring risk and protective factors, the biggest thing that they talk about is reducing access to substances. We know that that makes a major difference. Dave's point is great. It's out there already. You know, I can pull down to any side street by the water and you can smell marijuana being smoked. And by the way, you're going to smell it more and more.
And that's legal right now.
Right, correct. And so as we begin to take a look at how do we build those protections in and looking at all the different costs. So the costs are going to show up in a variety of different ways. Dave hit on it, DREs, and how many of West Hampton Beach Village police officers have a DRE. Chief, I'd refer to you on that, but I do think the answer is just one at this time, correct?
Right now, I don't have any GREs. There are 2 officers, which are A-RIDE, which is an intermediary between the standardized field sobriety and the DRE program. But I am looking to expand the DRE program here.
Right. So those all become added expenses, right? Positive things for youth to be and community members to be engaged in. All of those things are going to cost money in a variety of different ways down the road.
Right, but excuse me, but I do want to point out that whether we allow for the distribution in cafes or not, we're still going to have the cost of the officers because it's legal now, and we're going to have to address it when it happens in our village.
Right.
So isn't that right, Chief? No matter what happens, we're going to have to expand the training.
And likely also, even if you restrict a storefront or a cafe, to our understanding at this point, as it's written, delivery services can still deliver into your town. I think we all saw some news headlines last week, Bezos and Amazon, they're ready for American legalization. So this wave, whether we like it or not, is crashing on our beach. We can choose to have lifeguards by funding them to be there and not expect volunteers to be there any longer. We've pushed this as far as we can down the road, and now we really need to come together as a community to find this Ray Low. That's that beautiful curvy triangle in a Venn diagram with the circles overlay. It doesn't mean we have to agree on everything, but we're all here together addressing this issue that the state has advanced forward because they too couldn't delay this any longer. And we're not the first ones doing this. We're not going to be the last. We're right in the middle of this. And we have a lot of resources at our table, but we have to choose to sit at that table and participate in this. To Kim's point, yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, this is Brian. Sorry to cut you off, Dave. So just to chime in real quickly, in a very, high level way, Kim's made a lot of great points, and there's a lot of great points about challenges, but I don't really see the opting in as something that will affect those challenges. So we've discussed a lot of challenges and we have to address them. They're the reality now. This is the new world we're living in. But I don't think opting out really solves any of those challenges. Those challenges need to be addressed separately, like addiction and regulation and enforcement, and all those things are realities, like the mayor just said, that we are dealing with no matter what. So I personally, after this discussion and some research, I don't see any value to opting out just because of the challenges that we're going to have to face, whether we're in or out. So it's kind of a, dealing with the new reality. And I would say opting out would just be kind of more of a head in the sand approach that really doesn't change anything.
Right, except for you begin to say, let's take a harder look at it, right? Is West Hampton prepared for this right now? To think that there's not going to be a black market is part of a challenge, in that in every state, the black market, that it's legalized, the black market still thrives in so many ways. And then you have this
Well,
gray market too on the back end.
Is there a black market for alcohol?
Well, my guess is there is, but also we're burying kids at a ridiculous rate.
I think a lot of the black market is driven by tax rates. I was actually just reading up on an article in California. They're actually going to spend $100 million to help the legal industry battle and overcome what's going on with the black market, when in reality was overtaxation. Nobody wants to buy a $100 product that they can get on the black market for 25 or 50. So when we talk about addressing these issues, the hard issues, we need to start talking to our politicians saying, how do we address black market? By opting out, we have no idea what's going to happen. We're not participating in any of it. You know, democracy is not a spectator sport. And the sooner we move away from a discussion of just opting out of one small part of this bill, and to Brian's point, this is still going to affect our communities, we can now move on to assessing the staffing costs for the 9 days of training. I do believe, Mr. McManus, I think it's about 9 days, a 2-day primer, and then like another 7 days for the DRE.
DRE, the current program that I'm looking to send somebody to, is 2 weeks up in Syracuse, and then I have to send them down to Florida for a week as well. So we're looking at about 21 days there.
About 21 days. So, you know, as soon as we can start talking about these staffing costs, but actually even the first step, I've started discussions with Chief AJ McGuire here in Sag Harbor, and even starting with the simple questions, how many times has a DRE expert been requested on scene? And he suggested it was only a couple of times in a handful of years. So when we start moving away from small debates, I think this is a small debate in a large picture. We can really start addressing these issues. And that's what I'm most eager to do, to get these committees, subcommittees started on a local level. I'd love to participate and volunteer my time to get as much data and be part of the solution for the problems that are already existing. And to Kim's point, might be exacerbated some. You know, the wave's coming and we need to be prepared whether we want to or not.
And then the question becomes the where, right? So if you say, okay, if you guys opt in, one, I would really suggest you get some folks who are really smart about economics to sit and figure out what kind of check West Hampton's going to get, right? You definitely have that conversation, and agreed. They'll probably be right on Montauk Highway, just over the village border. I already know site plans that are going in for a dispensary that is really close to home. So I would definitely suggest you take a look at economics on this, and does West Hampton really benefit from it? The next part that I would say is the where. You know, what spot can you place one, right? You know, you have nursery schools all over the place. Of course, we have the school district. Southampton Town is putting in a youth and senior center. So that kind of kills parts of your, if there was an idea to put it on County Road 31. I was one of those silly people who watched the whole hearings. And we know that the hearings, they really talked about social justice with this. And unfortunately, one thing that we do know is that this impacts the Black and brown community tremendously. We know that when we take a look at, you know, will they benefit from this? And you know, and quite honestly, when you look at geography of the village of West Hampton and your demographics, you take a look at the north side of Montauk Highway being the place where we do tend to have a larger population of very vulnerable communities. So, or sub cultures in the community. So again, the hard part is, do we just sit and chew on this for 40 minutes at best, where Dave throws out his stuff, I throw out my stuff, then everybody kind of does their own research? You know, research is research. You're going to find the numbers you're going to want to find in this. You're going to find the information to go, this is why we should do it. But I can tell you, West Hampton has already lost people due to addiction. We've sat at their funerals. We've held their parents' hands. We've seen the rate of of suicide go up. And almost everybody who we've spoken to where it's been young male suicide has been linked to high potency THC. You don't know what the CCB board is going to come down with as far as what levels of THC. And in certain cases, we have to stop talking about this as marijuana and talk about it as THC levels, whether or not, the state is going to put a limit on it. We know that the states where it's been legalized, they're revamping their policies around it because they saw an increase and they want to make sure that they create sounder policies. To think New York can kind of be the one that's going to beat out all other, policies and we're going to do it right has a sense of arrogance to it. I would hope we could do it better, but I can tell you this has been my life's work. And it's really hard to see that this is going to be any different than anything that we're up against. You will get your first people who are going to start to, your first wave of people are going to be people who've always been curious about it and never wanted to break the law. That's going to be your first wave of bachelorette parties and moms getting together and couples getting together. So you will always see an increase of that. Anytime you put a drug into a system, there's going to be just an increased rate of use. Now the name of the game becomes, how do we keep that so that that doesn't feed addiction when you're in this kind of place already that's so vulnerable because we're just coming off of you're dealing with two pandemics all at once.
It's interesting. And one thing we haven't talked about yet is we cannot ban home cultivation. So I know, Kim brings up very important points about having access to things. We've discussed how you can easily cross a municipal boundary, but home cultivation, if we don't participate in this and know what the program looks like, what legal products look like, black market products, if we don't participate in the process, we're going to be inundated in our community and we're going to lack the resources. I don't even want to make this a revenue thing from tax dollars, but just the sheer fact of showing up to the ball game to learn the rules of the game. So you can really root for the folks, when they strike out. Is that a good thing? Was that your son at the plate, or are you rooting for the other team? But if you don't understand the context and the rules, how can you wholeheartedly participate?
Well, we're going to need to, as a board, decide if we want, it's a two-part question. Do you allow the distribution centers or do you allow the cafes? So, each one is a different decision. And if we decide we don't want one or both, then we have to pass a local law. And it's correct. Someone said it's subject to a permissive referendum. And so 30 days, the public has to ask us to put it to a vote. They have to submit a petition. But when we can limit it to location. So if we didn't want it in the downtown area, either one of those, we could do it up in the business district north of Montauk Highway. But, Kim mentioned the center that's going in, that the town is going to open at the old Anona building. And we haven't gotten anything from the town yet in terms of plans. They were calling it a senior center. Kim, you said you have knowledge that it's a youth center or both, but we don't have anything official yet. But what is the, the space between the two places? Is there something in the legislation that says it can't be more than 500 feet or 200 feet?
There's definitely minimum guidelines. I think it's close to 500 feet to schools. Some of these precedences we'll see set like in some of the liquor laws. Obviously, a municipality could go a bit further and say, hey, maybe we'd like, larger setbacks and boundaries. But really what I see, and this has already started in Southampton Town in the planning department, they have overlay maps and other things. And I'm sure within, a half of a day's work session, they could at least get a few different overlays and some different zoning things and say, these are the areas potentially where it should go. And in my opinion, this is an opinion here, I really think the community should be queried. What are you guys thinking? Who actually wants in on this? Is it part of are these going to be social equity applicants? People from brown, black, and ethnic communities that have been disproportionately affected. We're speaking on their behalf. In my experience, my phone rings and a lot of these people are trying to figure out how to access this marijuana boom. And to be honest, one of the lowest economic barriers to entry is going to be in a dispensary. Whereas a cultivation facility is going to be very modern. Manufacturing facilities are high compliance. Compliance means expensive costs and audits, facilities, and a dispensary is really going to be the access for a lot of the mom and pops. So we almost need more feedback from our communities at large. Who are these interested parties and what are their intentions? And that's the beauty of MRTA. So somebody who wants to have a dispensary, they have to submit in writing to the town what their intentions are within a certain time window. And the municipality gets to write a letter of review. You know, they have input on that. And I would not think also in the beginning that, so I do sit on the New York Cannabis Growers Processors Association board. I'm the committee chairman for Long Island. As much as we're pushing for unlimited dispensary licenses, it's not our expectation in the first year or two that the state's going to open this wide open. I think, you know, they want to have dispensaries in some strategic locations with vetted, stable owners, managers, but they just don't want to flood New York State with this out of the gate because, you know, stumbling before you even start is not New York style, or at least their intention with MRTA.
Kim, you said that there is a site plan submitted already for a distribution center, but we didn't get that in the village. Are you talking
Not
about
for,
the
not
town?
for you, but just outside of the village boundaries.
Oh, so Southampton Town already, even though
It
they
may-
haven't
it
decided
may-
what to
I'm
do?
not- Yeah, I'm not sure that it's been submitted. It may be in, but it's in the planning stages right now. So I don't know where it landed with Southampton Town. They have not voted yet. It is assumed because the reservation will be selling, there is an assumption that Southampton Town will move to allow for dispensaries and for, I'm not sure where they landed with cafes, but we are hearing both of that. But again, you know, it's that all again goes back to the referendum piece. It goes back to where all that lands. You know, I think part of the challenge is, you know, I say this often, this of course is my life's work, right? It's what we do here at this organization. It's what we've always done. And so we do see things from, you know, a very different perspective than most. We don't see this as benign. We know we're constantly, you know, just New York State solved, was awarded millions and millions of dollars for the McKinley settlement, which was the opioid settlement, right? So we sued the opioid companies and we got a lot of money from them, but then we had to fight for months and months and months for that money to stay dedicated to this field, dedicated to the prevention, treatment, harm reduction work that so many of us are doing. And so this idea that we'll see this, it'll all be dedicated and it won't be for bridges and tunnels and all those different things comes down to the individual community and how they're going to choose to sell it. How they're going to choose to spend it. This is my community. The different part of this conversation for me is this is where, you know, I live live and work within a mile. We never leave West Hampton Village, right? We've been here for a long time. And when you look at what do I want to happen in my own home, this really becomes that piece that is different than just having a conversation about policy elsewhere. And I know that when we take a look at who's investing in this, Altria, right? Big tobacco is now big marijuana. And so to think that this is going to stay on this local, nice little area for, you know, to help people, really, this is a very large investment. That is happening across the country. And it's an investment that we have to think hard about. Is this really what West Hampton Beach needs right now, today, based on the information that we have? And one final reminder is the only control you have is time, place, and manner. That's it. That is it, you know. So village zoning about neon signs and how they market and sign, you have time, place, and manner. And that is what you have control of if you make the decision to opt in on this.
Here's a, go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Joan.
Thank you. What is our timing as far as letting the state know opting in or out? How much time do we have to give them an answer?
We have till the end of the year, till the end of December.
Oh, okay. I mean, I think this requires a lot of community input and involvement. And I think other than the monetary issues that were brought up, this is a very emotional discussion.
Thank you.
And on that community input note, it's important to know that the OCM, the Office of Cannabis Management, has been created as soon as the governor signed the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act. We were hoping the Cannabis Control Board, the board of 5 members, would have been appointed by the end of general session, the state session, the end of the week. That did not happen. It's my understanding that after the primaries on the 22nd, they're going to come back for a special session to have these board appointees sat. There's still time to influence who those people might be. And also these advisory boards, the CAB, the Cannabis Advisory Boards. So by starting to become involved in this, putting our ear to the wall, accepting the fact that we're going to move forward, puts us in the driver's seat with the rest of the municipalities in the state to make sure that the money gets flagged and funneled now so we don't have to fight for it later. By influencing these politicians and these advisory board members, raising these concerns from the voices raised in our community. So now's the formative time for all of this. And the more we delay, the less power we're going to lose as we, the people here in the local level. The timer's ticking.
I think when you talk about the more delays, I mean, we're talking about, I don't think anybody even knows this is going on. And I think you have to involve the community and they have to know all of this. I mean, I'm hearing it really for the first time because I haven't been really paying attention to the whole marijuana thing. And I would love to stay for this whole meeting, but I have a doctor's appointment. So Maria, can I call you later and get filled in, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Kim and
Thank
Dave. Thank you.
Well, let's just do any of the board members or have any questions for Kim and Dave at this point? Any clarifications that you
No, I'm good.
need?
I don't need anything right now. I'm still open to
Awesome.
everything. I want to hear all the information.
Yeah.
On a note there also, 6 p.m. this evening, Riverhead Town's going to have a follow-up meeting regarding dispensaries, opt-out, et cetera. And a reminder, this is a follow-up after overwhelming support in the poll to not opt out by I think it was over 1,400 respondents. But that'll be at 6 p.m. this evening.
How did they do that poll?
On their website, and Southampton Town did very much the same thing with similar numbers, 60 to 70%.
That's interesting. That is something interesting.
And I agree, it's difficult to get all the community members' voices to the table, especially in a civil conversation. One of you said it, this is very emotional for a lot of people. You know, there's a lot of tender areas we're poking at, you know, law enforcement, mental health, the fact that prohibition has created marijuana, which was perceived as a toxic drug. It's really difficult to create this new world together. And I'll leave that to you as a proposal, you know, how municipality works to get public opinion in a civil manner, but also a timely manner. So maybe by the end of the year, you have to have a resolution, but you would know better than me. I'm sure there's logistics with getting things on the calendar, having things written, going for review. So I think that would be the first step I would advise to a town attorney or similar person, a clerk, to review and find out what your hard stop is and by when is your actual deadline. And then work back from there, the logistics of what things look like.
It's my understanding that we have to pass a law, and the process for passing a law, we have to publish the law and have a public hearing on it and then take a vote on it, essentially. So that takes at least a month or two. So the time is short.
Very.
But it does come down, in my mind, all these issues are in place, whether we opt in or opt out, the issues of addiction and the threat to our youth or a threat to the community Those issues exist whether we opt in or opt out. All we're opting in or opting out of is a building use. It's a zoning issue, a building use zoning issue. And that's all we're voting on in West Hampton Beach. I don't mean to oversimplify it, but I think that's, we don't have control of all the other issues. We may have input, but not control.
Well said, Ralph. And I just want to thank Kim and Dave for all this information. It's incredibly helpful and very much needed, to make an informed decision on this.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both. I agree.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, I mean, and Kim provided us with some, a PowerPoint that I distributed to the trustees, and we can make that available too on the website. We'll have, I think, 2 public hearings. We'll have the schedule of first public hearing, get comments from the community, then keep it open for another meeting, get some additional comments, and then we can make the decision if we're gonna pass the law.
And if I may just make one suggestion that I've attended a lot of meetings like this to solicit, in that public comment period, people, interested parties, like somebody who may be interested in having a dispensary within the boundaries of the municipality, somebody who may wish to be cultivating commercially within the boundaries of the municipality. So yes, it's important to understand and hear the voices and opinions of our neighbors, but also to hear from the people who are the interested parties. So technically, to my understanding right now in this call, and I know this is the first meeting, none of us really have a stake commercially in this business. So we don't even know who these characters are. They haven't even come to the table yet, who could be, just community members we haven't met or heard from.
Well, that's always the issue, is to get public engagement,
Telling me.
and to have people participate. I mean, we'll advertise it on our website, but how many people look at our website? And then we'll put it in the newspaper. Hopefully that catches people's attention as well.
Yeah, I'd like to see if we could set up a poll if that's possible. It'd be interesting to see how it comes out.
I think that's a great first step.
I think we can through our new website. It would go through MailChimp, I think.
All right, well, let's start in some direction like that and see how it comes up.
It just gives us a starting point. That's about it. I mean, that's all it does. It gives us a starting point as to what, how people feel. Because I like to get information from everybody. I mean,
How do you do that?
Good.
Yeah.
How could that work anonymously, right? Because, how does that work where you're guaranteed that the person weighing in on that poll
Good
actually lives in the village of West Hampton Beach and has
Right.
voting power?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think that we can
It's kind of like
regulate
American
that.
Idol. Like my idol never wins, the one I want, because it's fixed from the beginning. Now,
Were the town polls anonymous?
I do believe so. Yeah, I do believe so.
Yeah,
was
I'd
there-
like to see, I wouldn't like to see that. I don't want to see an anonymous poll. I like to see people that would, bring
Yeah.
forward with their real ideas.
And then
It's
conversely,
going
there
to
is,
push a lot of people away,
Yeah.
and people will try and circumvent it every possible way that they can to say that they live in the village, but they don't. That'll be, it's always that. That's why you take everything with those polls are all taken with a grain of salt as to what it is. But yeah, I'd like to see something anyway. Because the kids in the high school will start voting all the time. They'll hack into the system.
and that, the interesting thing is when you take a look at the study of the Monitoring the Future study, kids said, look, if this is legal, 25% said if this is legal, we're going for it. And so you already have, young people are saying, hey, we're just going to smoke it more, you know? So you have some of the data. It's again, looking in Dave uses his data, I use my data, right? And we each have data that represents the numbers that we want to have. But it really taking that comprehensive look of sitting down, whether it's Dave and I, along with you, rolling up sleeves and saying, okay, how much money does the village really make? Dave can bring in what he feels is the potential for the village to make. I can certainly show you what that's going to cost on other sides and all those wraparound costs that are happening. So, you know, I so much more time needs to be spent. Time is not your friend on this, on either side of this conversation, and definitely need to make it, prioritize it in conversation.
I'll say this, $5 to $10 million gross sales, marijuana products within a municipality like West Hampton Beach with its influx of visitors and residents is reasonable. So just take your 3% off of that.
But it's also my understanding that, you know, so there's 4% tax, the county gets 1, but of the remaining 3,
You get
it doesn't
3.
all come to the village. I understand that if the town does not opt out, that we would have to share the 3% with the town or come to some kind of an agreement. If we can't come to an agreement, then we have to split it.
I'm going to find that out for you. I could find out as early this evening, and possibly as a carrot on a string here. Maybe that'll be information that could be shared in Riverhead. We have some folks that are going down there. It's my understanding, though, the split is with the county and the municipality, that it doesn't get split further. But that's a very good point. That needs
Yeah, just
clarification.
that when you're a village in a town, I think that
You're a village. Yeah,
they
Maria's
expect-
correct. That's what I understand from, if you're a village within the town and the village opts in and the town opts out, we have to share our percentage with the town.
Well, if the town opts out, they're not eligible for any of the funding. That's
Right, but
that mechanism.
if we both
Read
opt
it
in,
carefully.
we have to give.
I'm going to clarify
Yeah.
that. Good point.
Yeah, it's really, they've got some really twists and turns in the thing.
They did.
Yeah.
They really did.
But I think Ralph had to hit the point on, for us in the village, you're right, it's a zoning issue. Comes down to basically a zoning issue for us. Whether we allow them in or allow them out, doesn't, you know, we can control where they may be. But that's as far as we can go. We can't say you can't bring it in. All right, we have no authority, no control. We can't say any of that.
Right, or grow it. There's 10 licenses associated with this, right? So it's not just one license. The only thing is time, place, and manner is in your control. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Marketing, color schemes,
Yeah.
light, cameras, action, the fact that they're not going to be able to bring their money down to the bank, all those different things come as part of the conversation that, you know, doesn't fall under the general black and white that's right in front of you.
Yeah. Hey,
A lot to think about.
they didn't make this easy, did they?
No. Well,
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like from the feedback that it's, you know, we're focusing on the fact that the challenges will be here whether we opt in or out. But, and, you know, there would be the tax incentive, although that may not be significant, and we shouldn't, you know, it's important, of course, but we shouldn't be driven by that. We should be thinking, is this going to make the village better? Is this something we want to have within our boundaries?
And is it in public health interest? And that's public health is the name of the game right now.
I think that's at the heart of MRTA, is addressing public health by turning the black market inside out, and addressing social inequities. That's at the heart of MRTA. That's half of that marijuana legalization bill.
You broke up just then for me anyway. Could you repeat that?
Public health and social equality, social justice are what make up the bulk of MRTA, of that bill. You know, so just as much as this is complicated, these issues have been mulled over for years. Many compromises were weighed, and this is the best that they could bring to the table. Is it perfect? No, but is it better than what's been before? Yes.
And do you think that I'm correct when I was saying that we can split the, you know, we can say no to one and yes to another? We don't have to, like, maybe we don't want the cafes where people are sitting outside, you know, smoking.
My unsubstantiated opinion would say likely you could split it, but I'm going to also get that verified this afternoon as well, and I can share that.
Anything we read said and or, and that you did have the option to make the choice between the two.
Okay, that was between the dispensaries and cafes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because cafe is unique. Are these just edibles, which people are going to sit around for an hour and a half, wait for something to kick in? Or is it smoking? We already know, consumption is associated with any smoking or vaping outside. So the cafes is definitely a little even more complicated than dispensaries.
And then who's driving home from there? Like, who's your designated driver? The person who's been sitting in there, it has a lot of
Yeah.
impact.
So as we understand the bill, you can't smoke marijuana in your car, but the passenger could eat an edible. There's layers and complexities here.
It's certainly going to be a challenge for the police department.
Sounds like a law enforcement nightmare.
It's not a good time for law enforcement on this one. This creates a lot. It's always created challenge. This is just added on it.
I'll say this, though, I've become buddies with our local police chief. We have frequent conversations. There's many of us in the community, like myself and Kim, we're here to help with resources. We're here to help bring the community together. We're here to help make sure you get the resources you need. Because hopefully you recognize the woes I have as a farmer, or that Kim has as, mental health, addressing these concerns in the community. And the one favor I ask is don't believe the promises of the big businesses when they come and knocking with their proposals, is that you keep this within your community and you have this conversation continue with your community members. They will come very soon. And they're not as polite. They're twice as slick.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you both for joining us. And then does anybody else have any other comments at this point before we schedule our next meeting? Okay. We'll think about how to do a poll and do more outreach to the community to get some input from there. And we'll certainly call you if we have any questions or want some additional information. We appreciate all the work you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right. So I need a
I
motion
think
to
we
close
should,
the
I think we should keep
meeting.
this as an open public
So
hearing.
moved.
Well, okay, it's not a public hearing yet. We'll schedule one, so we'll just,
Just to reschedule a new
Yeah.
one then? Yeah, okay.
thanks, though.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
All right. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, you
Everybody
too.
be well.
Good afternoon.